Chapter 2 of Forgotten Treasure. Jody gazed at the blank space where the diary used to be. In its place was a small card that said the diary had been stolen the night before. It asked anyone who knew anything about the theft of the diary to see Mrs. Jenkins. She was the curator, the person in charge of the museum. "Let's go talk to Mrs. Jenkins," Jody suggested. "I want to know what happened." Brian sighed and followed his friend. "Then can we go bike riding?" he asked. "Hey, that reminds me of a joke." Jody cringed. "When is a bike not a bike?" Brian didn't wait for Jody to try to answer. "When it turns into a driveway. Get it? It turns into..." "I get it," Jody said. He and Brian walked down a long corridor till they came to the big wooden door that said Curator. Jody knocked softly on the door. "Come in," said a pleasant voice. He opened the door and stepped into the large room. Mrs. Jenkins' office had once been the captain's sitting room. It was still decorated with old paintings of great sailing ships. "Hi, Jody," Mrs. Jenkins smiled. "What can I do for you today? Are you writing another report on Captain Bracken?" "No," Jody answered. "Actually, I wanted to know what happened to the captain's diary." "Oh," Miss Jenkins said sadly. "It was stolen last night along with some of his maps of the area." "Why would anyone steal maps?" asked Brian. He entered the office and stood next to Jody. "That's what's so strange," said Mrs. Jenkins. "There are plenty of more valuable items in the displays, like Captain Bracken's gold watch." Mrs. Jenkins seemed lost in thought, and she looked out the window. She faced the cove behind the museum. That's where the captain's ship was anchored. Captain Bracken had built the house so he could see the water from almost every room, but his sitting room had the best view of all. Jody pictured Captain Bracken sitting where Mrs. Jenkins was. He saw him looking out at the same view over 100 years ago. "Maybe the thieves were looking for clues to find Captain Bracken's buried treasure," Jody said. "Really, Jody?" Mrs. Jenkins shook her head. "I'm surprised that you of all people would believe those rumors." "But Captain Bracken was a pirate. Pirates bury treasure chests," Brian said. "First of all," Mrs. Jenkins said in a stern voice, "Captain Bracken was not a pirate. There's no evidence that he stole anything from anybody. He was a wealthy merchant and a respectable citizen who left everything he had to this town. Secondly," she continued, "treasure chests are found more often in books than in real life." Brian looked down at the floor, embarrassed. But Jody wasn't so easily stopped. "Maybe the diary had clues to where the treasure is buried. That would explain why the thieves took the maps," Jody reasoned, "and why they didn't take the gold watch or other expensive stuff," Brian chimed in. Mrs. Jenkins wasn't convinced. "If you have any ideas about who took the diary, I hope you'll tell me. It might help the police catch the thieves, but I wouldn't waste my time treasure hunting if I were you." The phone on Mrs. Jenkins' desk rang. The boys left so Mrs. Jenkins could get back to work. "Now what?" asked Brian as they went downstairs. "Now we go treasure hunting," exclaimed Jody. "I want to catch those crooks and get the diary back. And the best way to do that is to find the treasure before they do." "But Mrs. Jenkins said there is no treasure," said Brian as they passed under the model ship. "Adults don't know everything," Jody said. He turned toward the exit. "Besides, even if there isn't any treasure, the thieves must think there is. Why else would they have stolen the diary and the maps? If we look for the treasure, we're sure to find them." "I'm not so sure I want to find them," Brian said. "They're criminals. You know what they call people who aren't afraid of criminals?" Jody took the bait. "What?" he asked. "Dead!" Fear crept into Brian's voice as he delivered the punchline. "Well, be careful," Jody calmed Brian, but he was scared too. "Come on, let's start with the poem," suggested Jody. After all, it was the last thing Captain Bracken wrote when he knew he was going to die. "Why didn't he just tell someone where the treasure was buried?" asked Brian. Jody thought for a moment. Captain Bracken didn't have any family. Maybe he didn't trust anyone he knew. "Then why did he leave any clues?" Brian asked his friend. "In his will, the captain asked that his house become a museum. I guess he hoped someday the treasure would end up there," Jody offered. "He left all of his other stuff to the museum. Maybe he wanted someone from the museum to dig it up after he died," he added. The boys got on their bikes. "So how do we find this treasure?" asked Brian as they pedaled away. "If we look at the poem line by line, maybe we'll find a clue." Jody recited the first 4 lines. "Beneath my ship, all blue and green, a shimmering gift, the thing of dreams." "Well, that's easy," said Brian smugly. "His ship's anchored right over there." He nodded in the direction of the bay. and the water's blue-green, the treasure must be under the ship.